the funeral, the dog wouldn't stop barking at its owner's coffin. After pausing for a bit, the attendees opened it and let out screams of terror. But what did they find? Why was the dog so insistent that they opened the coffin? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. It was Officer Ethan Carter's funeral day, bright yet cold, with consistent rain as the crowd of mourners entered the cemetery. Ethan's family, who hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years, had flown from California to New York that day. They sat near the coffin while Ethan's police colleagues made their appearance. All the officers wore their uniforms, except for the big dog walking with them. This dog, Max, was Ethan's police dog partner, and losing Ethan hit him hard. They had a rough beginning, but grew to be inseparable in just a few months. Now, Max was deeply saddened by Ethan's sudden death during a warehouse heist stop. The officers positioned themselves around the mourners and coffin, with Max lying down close by. Initially, everything was quiet except for the low cries of Ethan's family. The mood started to change only when Max walked up to the coffin. The police dog had been sniffing around the casket's edge, whimpering softly. But when he barked loudly, startling many attendees, other officers tried to calm him down. Despite their efforts, Max kept barking at the coffin, straining against his leash as he was led away. Everyone assumed Max was just deeply mourning, but they were unprepared for the astonishing discovery that awaited them. When Ethan Carter became a policeman in 2012, he immediately aimed to join the K9 unit. Ethan had adored dogs since he was a kid, always accompanied by his pet dog. Sadly, his dog had died 2 years before, and though Ethan was heartbroken, he was open to welcoming another dog into his life. Max, with 3 years in the K9 unit and recently without a partner due to unexpected events, would typically be put up for adoption in collaboration with local shelters. But Max was wary of strangers, making adoption difficult. His best hope was to bond with a new handler. Many officers had attempted to connect with Max over the past year. While Max always tried to protect them, he didn't really bond with any. This led to Max being considered hard to place. Dogs struggling to bond were often removed from duty, and Max was nearly out of time. Then, Ethan became his new handler. The officer knew beforehand it might be tough to bond with the dog, but he remained optimistic. On their first meeting day, Ethan brought treats and a comfy dog bed for the back of his patrol car. He waited excitedly in the police station parking lot until Max was led out to him. Ethan stepped up without hesitation, holding out his hand as advised. Max sniffed Ethan, gave a single bark, then lay down as his leash was passed over. Suddenly, it was just the two of them in the empty parking lot. Ethan whistled softly, heading to his car, with Max following at a slow pace. Max jumped into the car, settling on the seat away from Ethan, who sighed but got into the driver's seat, hoping with time Max would grow to trust him as much as he trusted the original officer. The first week flew by in their quiet town, with most of their police calls being straightforward. Ethan and Max worked efficiently together, completing tasks flawlessly. Yet, Ethan felt a twinge of sadness because Max still hadn't shown a real connection with him. Max would follow Ethan at work, obey commands, and eat what was given. But he would always return to the station's kennels after their shift, unlike other dogs who went home with their officers. Ethan had prepared his home, especially for Max, despite living alone since college. He transformed his apartment into a cozy, inviting space for Max, with soft blankets, a warm bed, and new toys and treats ready and waiting. But as weeks turned into months without any sign of Max warming up to the idea of living with him, Ethan began to worry that Max might never feel at home with him. Everything changed around 2 months after Ethan and Max started working together. They received a call about a young girl, Katie, who was missing from a hike. Despite efforts, search teams couldn't find her, and her phone was unreachable. Ethan and Max, with Max being highly skilled in search and rescue, were sent out immediately. At the scene, the rescue team gave Max one of Katie's clothes for scent tracking. After sniffing it and exploring the secured area, Max barked sharply and dashed off in a direction away from the last known location of Katie, who had changed her route to a different trail in the forest. Ethan tried to keep up, but Max's leash slipped and the dog sprinted ahead, leaving Ethan behind. Following the sound of Max's persistent barking, Ethan and the rescue team pushed on. But before we learn what happens next, give this video a like to help it reach 7K and subscribe to the channel. They reached Max to find a shocking scene. Recent storms had caused part of the trail to collapse into a ravine, where Katie was found several feet down, unconscious on debris. Max stopped barking as Ethan approached, but the ground, weakened from the slide, started crumbling under Ethan's weight. Max whined, struggling on the unstable ground. Reacting swiftly, Ethan grabbed Max's harness, pulling him to safety. The rescue team then safely retrieved Katie, and after a medical check, it was clear both she and the officers were okay, with Katie expected to recover fully thanks to Max and Ethan's actions. That evening, as Ethan opened the car door for Max, he was moved to tears seeing Max settle into the bed he'd prepared, tail wagging. For the first time in months, Max showed trust in Ethan. That night, instead of returning to the kennel, Max went home with Ethan, marking a new beginning in their partnership. Throughout the following year, Max and Ethan's bond deepened, and by the end of 15 months of working together, they appeared utterly inseparable. Their colleagues, who hadn't managed to connect with Max, were genuinely happy for their remarkable bond. Everything was going smoothly for the duo until a late night in July 2013, amidst a spree of burglaries. The criminals had been targeting poorly secured warehouses, initially just stealing goods, but eventually escalating to violence with a security guard being fatally shot. This elevated the burglars to a high threat level within the police department, making their capture a top priority. Consequently, Max and Ethan were paired with Michael, a new recruit, to address the rising warehouse thefts. One night, the team surveilled a recently opened warehouse on the city's outskirts, a prime target for burglars due to its lack of security and storage of valuable items. The police decided to station the trio in an unmarked car outside to monitor for any suspicious activity. As hours ticked by, Max growled softly, alerting Ethan to a shadowy figure near the warehouse. Signaling Michael, they approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Michael split off to cover one side of the warehouse, while Max and Ethan moved to the other. Soon, Max growled again, this time at 3 individuals in black hoodies trying to break in. Ethan aimed his weapon, ordering them to freeze. Just as it seemed the situation was under control, gunfire erupted. A thief ambushed Michael, leading to immediate chaos. Ethan managed to send a distress call just before confronting another assailant. By the time backup arrived, the perpetrators had fled, leaving Max and the officers injured. Sadly, Ethan succumbed to his injuries that night, leaving Max without his partner once more. Michael was critically injured and placed in a coma. Ethan's funeral arrangements were made by the department, and Max, looked after by another officer, was present to bid farewell to Ethan. Max's distress and barking at the coffin saddened and disturbed the attendees, despite efforts to soothe him. Max's agitation continued until he broke free, rushing back to the coffin with increased urgency in his barking. Amidst the confusion, a senior officer suggested that opening the coffin for Max to see Ethan might bring him peace, a practice observed with grieving canine officers before. The family hesitated at first. Since no one had viewed Ethan's body due to the decision against a wake and their delayed arrival, they had chosen a closed coffin ceremony. But the distressing sounds from Max, too poignant to ignore, convinced Ethan's mother to allow the coffin to be opened. As the funeral home staff opened the casket, Ethan's mother let out a scream of horror. Inside was not her son, Ethan Carter, leaving everyone in shock. The mother demanded answers about the unknown man in the coffin and the whereabouts of her son. Max, however, calmed down and lay beside the grave, as if he had always known his partner wasn't in the coffin and was satisfied now that he had alerted everyone to the mistake. Ethan's mother was incensed, leading to the suspension of the funeral as the police chief and hospital were contacted for explanations. The attendees, including the family and officers with Max, went to the police department for answers, initiating an immediate inquiry. The hospital, having identified the deceased as Officer Ethan Carter, was at the centre of the confusion, with the specifics of the error still unclear. The police chief, along with the family and officers, went to the hospital seeking clarity. While awaiting their arrival, the doctor responsible for Ethan's case went to the area where belongings of the deceased were kept until claimed. He found the items belonging to the officers, including the one in a coma, sealed and labelled. Suspecting a mix-up due to the hectic nature of their admission night, he examined the bags to confirm identities. Opening the bag labelled for the comatose officer revealed Michael Collins' ID, which didn't match the patient upstairs. The doctor, now anxious, opened the other bag marked for the deceased and found Ethan Carter's wallet. Realising the grave mistake in identifying the bodies, he immediately contacted the hospital director, confirming a critical error had occurred in the body identification process. Upon their arrival at the hospital, the group was immediately taken to the director's office. After a detailed conversation and multiple apologies, the sequence of errors that led to the mix-up was explained. On the night of the warehouse event, 2 officers were rushed to the hospital, one fatally wounded and the other severely injured, leading to a coma and extensive facial bandages. Amid the chaos, the hospital staff failed to verify the identities from the officers' wallets. With Ethan's family far away and unable to identify the body, the hospital's assumption went unchallenged, and the police, stretched thin, proceeded with the funeral arrangements based on this flawed identification. It was only through Max's insistence and unusual behaviour at the funeral that the error came to light, potentially preventing the grave mistake of burying the wrong person under Ethan's name. The families of both officers were understandably upset, but after discussions and apologies from both the hospital and police department, an agreement was reached. A proper funeral was organised for Officer Michael Collins, with no issues this time. Ethan, mistakenly identified and in a coma as Michael, awoke a month later, deeply moved by the ordeal Michael's family had endured, and offered his deepest sympathies. Recovering from his injuries took time, with Max loyally by his side throughout. The bond between Ethan and Max remained unbroken by the incident. Ethan eventually took and passed the recertification exam to return to duty, with Max by his side, showcasing their undiminished partnership. Max's unwavering dedication played a crucial role in uncovering the truth, ensuring both families received the closure they needed. Can you believe the turn this story took? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. Until next time.